Hello guys and welcome to my new Restoration Druid guide for patch 8.0, the pre-patch and the early entry into the BfA expansion itself. So there's been some changes made to Restoration Druids in terms of the talent choices, in terms of the rotation as well. And this guide will be covering things like talent, stat priority, the legendary usage for pre-patch if you are playing the pre-patch right now, and we'll be looking at all of those. And first of all, let's look at the talents. So there has been some shift in the talent choices for Restoration Druids. Some talents have been merged, some talents have become better and things like that. So first of all, in tier 15, you'll see that Abundance and Scenario Ward is probably the best choice right now, depending on the situation. Prosperity is really not pulling the right numbers right now for it to be viable in raiding situation, because this guide mainly will be covering raiding situation or raiding Restoration Druids. So first of all, Abundance has been changed quite drastically. So for each rejuvenation you have active, regrowth cost is reduced and critical effect chance is increased. So the more reduced you have, the more efficient regrowth becomes. You want to cast more regrowths. The fact is that this talent itself is kind of situational as well. It provides it gives you an ability to be more of a burst, single target burst healer, and it works really great for situations like Coven of Shavaris. If you notice that the Chilled Blood debuff, someone has the Chilled Blood, and you really need that instant healing instead of that prolonged healing from rejuvenation. So you'll probably pick Abundance and you'll probably be casting regrowths on them. I know, it feels weird to be casting regrowths outside of clear casting, but once you have like 5+ rejuvenations rolling on the raid, which becomes easier with Legendary Shoulders, I'll talk about that later on. Once you have 5+ rejuvenations rolling, it becomes very efficient to be casting regrowth to provide that single target burst healing. And you also know the Scenario Ward is also a good option here. Scenario Ward has always been a good talent for raiding situations. It is basically and essentially a hot on a priority target or a tank. It builds up your mastery. The fact is that Restoration Druid Mastery, the way it works, you want to have as many hots as possible on players. It's going to increase the healing, your healing on them. So Scenario Ward, a hot on them, that can be also extended but through the use of Flourish as well, so you can kind of min-max it as well. So tier 30 has been kind of changed. Displacer Beast is no longer here, and that is terrible. I love my Displacer Beast, and I definitely feel the loss of it. Instead of it, you get Tiger Dash, you get this burst movement straight away, and it's essentially really easy to use. It's one of those talents that's probably going to be advisable for new players or for players who are like, I just need movement speed boost right now. And it's going to be great for that. Wild Charge is arguably the better option here if you can really min-max it, if you really know how to use it properly. The fact is, it is clunkier to use than Tiger Dash, but if you can, there are macros out there that can help you with that. And if you can really master Wild Charge, you can become really efficient. Renewal is really not that great at the moment. In tier 45, there's been some changes here. Now, if you're doing progression fights, Guardian Affinity is probably going to be the default choice here. The reduction in damage, the ability to use Frenzy Regen, which has been nerfed again. Frenzy Regen and Bear Form has been nerfed, but it's still an amazing cooldowns. Frenzy Regen can still provide a decent amount of healing when you need it. Now, the other two options are kind of situational. The range increase from Balance Affinity, the movement speed increase from Feral Affinity can be useful in certain situations. In terms of damage, if you really want to pump out damage or help out your raid, Balance Affinity is becoming more and more popular and more stronger. The fact is that if you use Balance Affinity, you will be using abilities that are damaging abilities that cost mana, which means you're kind of like, do I want to help out the raid at the same time I will be using mana? Or do I want to help out the raid in terms of damage? With Feral Affinity, which your damaging abilities don't really require mana. So it really is kind of a situational pick. Progression fights, Guardian Affinity is going to be great. You need that damage reduction, is going to be really strong for it. Now in tier 60, completely situational, depending on what you need. Do you need that mass CC, or Typhoon is probably the default choice. It's super easy to use and it works on most scenarios. Tier 75, there's been two options that have been identified as one of the best, and that's Cultivation and Tree of Life. Now, Cultivation is a very passive ability that will not require any thought whatsoever from the player itself. You'll be just healing the raid normally, and if they dip low, if they dip below 60%, better, because you're going to get hot on them. That hot is going to stack with mastery. It's going to increase healing onto those targets. Those targets that dip low need that extra healing, so all of a sudden Cultivation works pretty well here. Now, if you really want to get the true numbers, you should be using WoW Analyzer. You can go into Warcraft logs, get your report ID, export that report ID or copy it into WoW Analyzer, and then you'll see a true power of Cultivation or Tree of Life, because if you look at in-game meters, they won't show the true potential of cultivation because it doesn't take into account the mastery gain that you get from it, to the same extent that Tree of Life is not going to show up on your meters as well. So WoW Analyzer can really show the true potential of each. Now, Tree of Life is a 3-minute cooldown. Again, if you spec into this, you kind of need to know when to use this or whether the fight is going to require an additional cooldown. It is a strong cooldown. It's 3 minutes, like I mentioned. Really, really strong values that it increases Rejuvenation's healing. It reduces Rejuvenation's cost. It makes your Wild Growth strong and things like that. It just makes your spells more powerful, and it can almost be considered as well as a mana saving tool because your Rejuvenations will they'll cost less as well. Again, you need to know if you can optimize this in a fight, so it requires prior fight knowledge. Now, in tier 90, you'll notice that Inner Peace and Spring Blossoms are probably the default choices here. For Mythic Plus, Stonebark is actually viable. Yeah, Stonebark is coming back. But either way, Inner Peace, which reduces the cooldown of Tranquility to 2 minutes, requires, again, you need to know the boss length. You need to know whether you can cast Tranquility relatively on cooldown and at the right times. So, as a Resto Druid who's speccing into Inner Peace, you need to make sure that you know the boss fight. If you look at fights like Mythic Agama and things like that, when intermission phases happen every 3 minutes, and those intermission phases is where you really kind of want to spend all of your cooldowns on, you'll be like, I don't really need Inner Peace. I get my cooldowns up anyways. So you'd probably be speccing into Spring Blossoms, considering that people are stacked up. Now, if you spec into Spring Blossoms, it's a lot more passive. It increases, or at least it gives a bigger priority to your Efflorescence. Either way, if you don't spec into Spring Blossoms, you should maintain your Efflorescence to as close to 100% as possible. But with Spring Blossoms, you want to make sure that there is enough people stacked up. You need to make sure that there's enough people stacked up during the fight and things like that to make a really good use out of it. Now, you also have to keep in mind that if you spec into Inner Peace, Tranquility is no longer castable on the move. So if the fight is really heavy movement, you have to move all the time, or at least when there's damage happening in the fight, but you have to move, and you can't make use of Tranquility, Inner Peace might not be a good option again. And you also have to keep in mind that in BfA, Tranquility has been changed to some extent because when you cast Tranquility, it's going to apply a HOT on the whole raid. That HOT is going to be increased in strength, or it's going to be stronger if you can cast Tranquility for longer. And that HOT can be extended by Flourish as well. And you can notice that in my raid frames right now, my grid turns green to showcase the people who have my Tranquility HOT on them as well, to basically, do I want to extend Tranquility HOT with Flourish? And now we go back into tier 100. In tier 100, the clear winner here is Flourish. Flourish is extremely strong right now. It's not only just Flourish, but in BfA, Essence of Ganir has also been baked into Flourish. So all of a sudden, this 1.5 minute cooldown is extremely strong if you can use it properly. It is really good, and like I mentioned before, it extends Tranquility HOT if you need that extreme healing for a prolonged period of time. And now we go into the rotation of Resto Druids. Now, the priority rotation of Resto Druids is very similar. I mean, you keeping up your Efflorescence, you keeping up your Light Bloom, you keeping up your Scenario Ward if that's up, you're using your Rejuvenations to apply healing, you're using your Swiftman to provide that spot healing, use Wild Growth when multiple people are taking damage. It's all the same. It's all there. The gameplay is the same. But what changes is that in BfA, you'll notice the rejuvenation duration is way shorter. It's 15 seconds. Again, if you're playing in pre-patch, you'll probably be using the Legendary Shoulders, which increases the duration of rejuvenation by quite a bit, so it's easier to maintain it. But this means the whole gameplay changes to an extent that you become a more proactive healer. You really need to know when the damage is coming out. Like, let's say 10 seconds before the damage, big damage is coming out, 10 seconds before it, you need to know that there's damage coming out. You need to know that you want to put out as many rejuvenations as possible. When the damage is about to hit 0.5 seconds or something, you're casting your Wild Growth, damage comes in, Wild Growth hits, you have rejuvenations rolling on the raid, you have Wild Growth HOT on everyone, and then you decide, do I want to Flourish, do I want to Trank? Because if you use Flourish and Tranquility, you want to make sure you have as many HOTs on the raid as possible, because it's going to add to your mastery stacks, and those cooldowns are going to heal for more. So you have these windows of opportunity, and how you spend those windows is what defines a good Resto Druid. Because, let's be honest, at some point in Legion, every Resto Druid used to spam rejuvenation, whether it was in with tier 19 and things like that, where you just spam rejuvenation. You don't even care who takes damage. You're just gonna maintain rejuves on everyone without thinking about it that much. That's changing, and that is the biggest change that happened in BfA. You now need to know when the damage is coming out. You need to know whether you want to use Flourish. You want to know whether you want to use Tranquility followed by Flourish, because Flourish will extend the duration of Tranquility. That's possible as well. If you're speccing into Incarnation Tree of Life, you need to know, when do I want to tie that in? Do I want to use it afterwards? Is the damage patterns, like how frequent are the damage patterns happening? If you don't want to think that much, you can go into Cultivation and you can go into Spring Blossoms, which makes it a bit more passive healing. But I can definitely tell you, if you know the boss patterns, if you know the boss fight, and you make a good use of these cooldowns appropriately, you can definitely get very, very good numbers. So this is the biggest change. I feel Resto Druids are becoming a bit harder to some extent. Like Resto Druid gameplay right now, or the proactive gameplay, is very similar to what Discipline Priests have to do right now with atonements. They need to apply atonements before the damage. Resto Druids have to apply rejuvenation before the damage. They need to know whether to use Flourish and things like that. So that's the biggest change, like I mentioned before. Now, if you also look at the stat priority, this is probably the shortest segment of the video. For a lot of people who used to use Resto Druid stat weight weak aura, Resto Druid stat weight weak aura was amazing, because only Resto Druids used to have this. You used to go do a fight and it'll tell you what secondary stats are extremely good. Now what's happening in BfA is that intellect is becoming much stronger, and your secondary stats are not, like, they're kind of falling a bit. But the fact is, the raiding Restoration Druid, the secondary stats were extremely close together in terms of evaluation or value. So you basically would pick the highest item level anyways. But now with an add-on, there's a new add-on, Healer Stat Weights, which basically gives the same effect as the Resto Druid Stat Weights. It'll tell you the stats per boss, per dungeon, and it works for every healer right now. And it works amazing for Restoration Druid. So you go do a boss fight, you can see what secondary stats are amazing, but usually the general advice, item level is going to be the king. Please use the add-on though. It's going to be a lifesaver in pre-patch, is going to be a lifesaver in BfA as well, if you want to really min-max your character. Now, if you're playing in pre-patch, you'll notice that you can use legendaries, and legendaries play a big part in pre-patch as well, because the fact is that probably the most popular legendary options right now is the legendary shoulders, which extend the duration of your rejuvenation, so you can pre-hard for a bit longer. Definitely an amazing legendary right now. It's probably picked by nearly every Resto Druid right now who's raiding. And then you have Velens / Pridas combo, which again is very popular. There are a couple of other legendaries strong, but definitely the most popular would be the shoulders, Velens, and or Pridas kind of deal happening here. The fact is that a lot of people used to use the High Fighter Machination and the Pantheon Trinket because they were extremely broken at the start of the pre-patch, but they were hotfixed. So now Velens is kind of coming into it and things like that. So, and the fact also that you can buy specific legendaries with essences, you definitely should pick up a certain combination of those legendaries if you are raiding in pre-patch. And now this has been basically my overview of Restoration Druid healing. Summary of this video, that there are certain talent builds that are available right now. There is a talent build that I like to consider the cooldown build, where you have that Tree of Life, Inner Peace, 2-minute Tranquility and Flourish, and a good use of those cooldowns is extremely rewarding. You're no longer spamming that rejuve mindlessly. You have to be careful about it, because mana is a big deal and things like that. You also have that more passive healing through Spring Blossoms and Cultivation. You also have changes to Innovate. Like, Innovate is a big deal. Innovate duration has been changed to 12 seconds, but it also applies a 1.5 second global cooldown onto yourself. So in a rare case scenarios where you have two Resto Druids in a raid, you kind of want to swap each other's Innovates, because if I get an Innovate from someone else, from another Restoration Druid, I don't get global cooldown to that. So I can spam for the 12 seconds. I can spam those rejuvenations. I need to make sure that I get that, efflorescence in there. I need to make sure that I get that wild growth in there to get a really good use out of the Innovate. Again, this has been my overview of Resto Druids. I really like to hear your thoughts about Restoration Druids. I really like to hear whether you like this more proactive healing style where you can make good use of your cooldowns. You need to make sure you know where the damage is coming from, when the damage is coming and things like that. Or whether you kind of prefer the Legion mindless, relatively mindless, keep that in mind, relatively mindless, rejuvenation spam and things like that. Let me know. I love to hear your opinions. Thank you for watching this, and I'll talk to you and I'll see you in the next guide.